The Legend of Zelda Ocarina of Time, one of the biggest pinnacles of gaming, one of the most hyped games to have ever come out, period. One that didn't disappoint like so many games do today. Over 7 million copies sold with tons and tons of perfect scores from both reviewers and gamers today. The most pre-ordered game of all time back in the day with over 500,000 copies. It earned over $150 million in US revenues, higher than any Hollywood film in the last 6 weeks of 1998. Thank you, Wikipedia, for that fact. Memorable tunes from the legendary Koji Kondo, graphics that were all worthy for the time, creating Z-targeting, a gameplay feature that is still being used by games nowadays, constantly still being placed at the top, or at the very least near to the top of the greatest games of all time lists. You get the point. The game is truly legendary and one of my all-time personal favorites. This review / retrospective is part of my Zelda 35th anniversary series. We've already done the original game and A Link to the Past, so here we are at Ocarina of Time. Links to the other 2 videos down in the description below. This video is going to be a lot of work for me, but it will all be worth it. Anyways, hey everyone, it's Vincent here with Just Gaming, and I'm here to talk about the one and only The Legend of Zelda Ocarina of Time. Enjoy. Ooh, okay, so there's going to be a lot to get through, but I'm excited to talk about it. Ocarina of Time was first shown off at Nintendo's Shoshinake, I hope I said that right, trade show in December 1995. I sadly couldn't find any footage of that if it even exists. Now, once again, mimicking the development of the original game with Super Mario Bros. And A Link to the Past with Super Mario World, this game was made right along with Mario 64. Ocarina of Time was planned to be a launch title for the 64 add-on, the 64DD. Now, for those of you who don't know, the 64DD was a disc-based add-on for the 64. It has a long history that deserves a video all on its own. Anyways, due to technical reasons that I honestly don't understand and poor sales of the DD, the game was moved onto a regular cartridge for the console. There were, however, still plans to release an expansion for the game on the DD. You could kind of consider this an early form of DLC or an expansion pack, I suppose. Now, much like A Link to the Past bit situation, Ocarina of Time's megabits went up from 16 all the way to 32 megabits, which made it Nintendo's biggest game that they had ever created up to that point. The team working on the game was actually so worried about the storage that it almost took on a Mario 64 approach in how you got to the different worlds. In Mario, you hop into paintings from Peach's castle to get to different worlds, and they were gonna make it so that way when you're in Ganon's castle, that was the central hub and you would run around and go to the different worlds from inside of that. This game was also the first in the series to use motion capture, particularly for Link's sword animations and his running around animations. They took heavy inspiration from Chambar, which is a special style of swordplay, and based the combat around that. Miyamoto actually wanted to have the game be in first-person mode, but decided against that as he felt Link should be seen at all times, and I have to agree with that. Now, this is a pretty well-known bit, but the game was actually running on a Mario 64 engine, but it was so heavily modified that Miyamoto actually considered it a whole new engine. They wanted this Zelda to have a much more cinematic feel when compared to the other games at the time, so they put a lot more effort than normal into the cutscenes. They decided to go with in-game graphics rather than full motion video type stuff. This was because of a few different factors. They wanted the story beats and the gameplay to be more smooth between each other. It also took up way less space than whatever full motion did, which is a big factor for cartridges. Finally, it was just easier for them to make it this way and quicker to make adjustments on the fly as they needed, which is a good thing because they changed the story only a few months before the game was fully launched in stores. The game was also the first time that Eiji Aonuma got in some of the Zelda action by being a dungeon designer, and later on would even become the head producer of the entire franchise. Link's character design was supposedly based on a big-time Hollywood actor, and while it has never been officially stated who the actor was, if it's who people generally think it is, he's still a pretty big-time actor even today. That actor being none other than the multi-Oscar nominated and one-time Oscar winning Leonardo DiCaprio, and honestly, I see the resemblance. Plus, the timing lines up well, with Titanic having just come out recently in Japan. The developers have said that it was based on an actor who was thought to be a good-looking guy and big at the time, so it all lines up and points to DiCaprio. Cool stuff if it's right. The game was originally going to be released in 1997, but was delayed to allow for extra dev time. And from what I can see, this was actually the first time the Zelda game would be delayed, and also something that would certainly become not uncommon for the series in the future, that's for sure, particularly Breath of the Wild. The game had so much hype surrounding it that it became sort of a blockbuster game for the entire gaming world, the same kind of hype that you would get with a modern Marvel movie like Endgame. And for the first time in the series, you could actually pre-order the game and you get this fancy dancy smancy gold cartridge, and it's all shiny and I love it. It's one of my favorite pieces of gaming in all of my collection that I own. Finally, there's actually multiple versions of the game as well. There is a gold card as mentioned before, but also the original gray card and an updated version of said gray card. I happen to own the original gray card, which I feel pretty cool about, I won't lie. The differences between the gold and the original gray card are none other than the shell, of course. But the original gray and the new gray do have some different things going on. You got the typical glitches and such being fixed, and big things were replaced, like the Fire Temple's music and blood color being altered from red to green, or sometimes in certain areas being removed entirely. So the temple music originally had an Islamic prayer being used. This was taken from a sample of the music library, but was again removed. It was originally thought that it was removed because it upset some Islamic folks, but that wasn't it at all actually. It was due to the fact that it actually tended to comply with Nintendo's harsh stance on religious type things being in their video games. And the chant was removed and updated with a different song in the gray card. And the blood was changed from red to green to help keep the game's E rating and not being bumped up to a teen, and now this is most notable with Ganon's blood at the end of the game. It's insane just how much development stuff there is. I probably still miss some things. And not only that, but literally just last month of me recording this, we found even more beta stuff on a beta F-Zero X card. It's crazy how much we are still learning about this game, and I love it. And finally, the game was released in Japan November 21st, 1998 and November 23rd, 1998 in America. Oh, jeez, like I told you, there's a lot to talk about and I really could keep going. There's even an Iwata Asks interview that I couldn't mention due to time, but we do need to move on already. The story is concise but sweet nonetheless. One day, a little fairy named Navi is summoned and talks to the great Deku Tree as he tells her to go out and find the hero, Link. Or, you know, whatever you name him in the naming screen. She goes and tells you to go see the tree yourself, and so you do. And he tells you that he's been cursed with something inside of him that's causing it. So you go inside and, naturally, you take care of it. Afterwards, he tells you that he will still die despite you saving him, but to go see Zelda and gives him the Forest Spiritual Stone. As you leave, a girl named Saria who, side note, I always called Sarah as a kid. I don't know, for some reason the name Saria just didn't register in my head. But anyways, she gives you an ocarina to use during your journey. You go and meet Zelda and see Ganondorf for the first time. She explains that she thinks that he's a bad guy and that you should go find your 2 remaining stones so you can get to the Sacred Realm before Ganondorf does. As you leave, you meet her guardian Impa who teaches you the Zelda's lullaby. You go find the other 2 stones, and when you're coming back to the Temple of Time, you see Zelda and Impa running away for some reason on horseback. But before they get too far, Zelda throws something into the water and we aren't sure quite what it is yet. We quickly find that Ganondorf was in pursuit of them though. He asks us where they went, but we refuse, so he blasts us and keeps on his pursuit. We go to see what Zelda threw, and it's a fancy new ocarina, so we go ahead and check out Saria's old dinky whatever it is ocarina and go to open up the Temple of Time and find the Master Sword. We pull up the sword and accidentally allow Ganondorf to get into the Sacred Realm and claim the Triforce. Link wakes up in the Sacred Realm and meets Rauru. Ignore my pronunciation, I've always been terrible at pronouncing it. And he tells you literally everything I just explained. Plus about the other sages that need saving, so we need to find them and get their medallions to add to our power to defeat Ganondorf. We then learn about someone named Sheik, a mysterious person that we don't know much about, other than that she helps us every now and then by teaching us a song to help with our adventure. Now, major plot spoilers from here on out, so go ahead and skip to here to avoid them. I'll give you a few seconds to skip. We go find them all and eventually learn that Sheik was Zelda the whole time, and we also learn that she was a sage too. She gives us the light arrows, and right as she does, Ganondorf kidnaps her and takes her to the castle. We go and attempt to rescue her and defeat him once and for all. After a game of magical ball tennis, we defeat him and rescue her, but he tries to bring us down by destroying his own castle. Of course, being the heroes, we escape, but at the bottom of the castle, he turns into his final beast form in one final attack, being Ganon. We finish him off in great fashion, and Zelda and the other sages then trap Ganondorf in the Dark Realm. Zelda uses the ocarina to send Link back into the past, Navi leaves you, and Link goes to warn young Zelda about Hyrule's fate before it's too late. The end. Quite a story. Lots of time traveling twists and turns, but as I mentioned, it's a solid story. Nothing groundbreaking, but I do think it's some of the best that Zelda's ever had. So you really can't go wrong here. Let's go ahead and talk about gameplay. Now before anything else, this game is not perfect, as no game is. So I just want to go ahead and get my minor complaints out of the way right now. But they really are super minor. One thing is the text speed, because oh my god, it is so slow, and you can't mash B to get through it faster, because then it skips all the speech bubbles rather than just the one that you wanted to. So you worry you might have missed out on some good stuff. I also don't like how the golden sculptures could sometimes work in the game. Just for the simple fact that some can only appear during night or a day, and without a guide you wouldn't know when one appears. So you could be right on top of a spawn point for one, but you might just be there at the wrong time of day and you would completely miss it and wouldn't think to just maybe try, changing daytimes. Plus the reward for getting them all is pretty worthless. You get unlimited rubies, but you always have nearly the maximum amount and you're just swimming in rubies that it feels like such a nothing reward for all the legitimately hard work that you did. So unless you're going for 100% completion, just get 30 sculptures so you can get the biggest wallet in the game, and then don't bother for them unless they just happen to appear right in front of you by chance. Now my final real complaint of the game is actually fixed in the 3DS version, and that's aiming. Definitely a little bit wonky and can be hard to work with. I had a particularly hard time with the Gerudo Training Ground arrow area, but I won nonetheless. The 3DS version, however, has gyro aiming, and that eliminates this issue completely. Now veterans of the game might be thinking I left out two common complaints here, one being the graphics. Like, look, yes, the graphics ain't too hot. Look at Link's face here, come on, what's even going on here? But at the same time, what did you expect? This game is on the N64, it's like basically 25 years old at this point. Heck, none of the games from this system look great these days. I don't know, this is I guess a mini rant, but I just don't get why people are always ragging on the graphics and how they suck these days again and again. Like, yeah, of course, we've come a long way since these types of graphics. Whatever, it don't bother me too much. You just kind of gotta put your mind in the mainframe of the time back then. And of course, the water temple. Everyone talks about it, how bad it is, and I don't know, I kind of like it. Yeah, menuing's a bit of a pain on the 64 version, but I like the temple. But we'll get to that when we get to that. Let's move on for now. Oh, and real quick, I actually made this a 5-heart challenge run for myself, so that's why my heart count is always so low in the footage, even when in late game. It was pretty fun, to be honest. But yeah, I just wanted to give a quick explanation for that. Let's actually get on this time. This is the first Zelda in 3D, with the first 4 games all being in 2D, and Ocarina of Time sure does take advantage of that and will help create mainstays for both the series and gaming in general because of it. Probably the biggest thing that helped change gaming was with the Z targeting system. It's so simple, but really was something huge. All you gotta do is hit Z and it'll lock onto whatever target you're looking at. Whether it be characters, enemies, signs, or just a general point of interest, this frees up the need to constantly be messing around with the camera so it looks at whatever you want automatically. This is particularly useful with enemies as they tend to be moving around a lot, so the camera just follows them. It's such a simple and intuitive mechanic that, as mentioned before, not only do Zelda games still use it to this day, but games in general use the system to varying degrees, and before Ocarina, it straight up didn't exist. As for things that are a little bit more series exclusive, this is the first time that going to Great Fairies actually gives you more than just heal or upgraded weapons. Now they can actually give you special items or boosted stats for certain things. For special items, you can get these goddess power crystals that I like to call them. They have various functions like being able to flare up a wall of fire around you, one being able to set up teleport spots in temples, which is very useful in the water temple, and the last one grants you invincibility as long as your magic meter holds out. You can also get extra defense with one of the fairies as well. Another thing the game allows you to do for the first time is play instruments. Now you might be thinking, wait, that's not right. You could play them since the very first game, and you're right, but this is the first one that you can actually have full control over the music. Basically, you play different songs to the ocarina by pressing different buttons on the C stick or the A button. There are many songs in the game, and each one serves a different purpose. One song, like the Song of Storms, brings a storm along, and you actually need it to get to the bottom of the well. Epona's song summons your horse, Epona. And there are many teleporting teleporting songs that will teleport you to different areas of the map. Like the Nocturne of Shadows, for example, brings you to the entrance of the Shadow Temple, or a personal favorite song, Bolero of Fire, brings you to the Fire Temple. And you get the point. I actually remember as a kid that I would just turn on the game and start randomly playing these songs because I just enjoyed hearing them that much. Finally, a big thing that the game did do for the first time and definitely appeared in later Zeldas is horseback riding on your trusty steed Epona. She's a great way to move around Hyrule Fields quickly and is the only way that you can find big Poes on the fields. The only combat you have on her is shooting arrows, and it isn't much, but it's still cool to see implemented, and the combat does get expanded upon in later games. Now mind you, you can only get her and play her as an adult, and speaking of adult Link, let's go ahead and talk about some things you can only do as adult versus young Link. You can only use certain items as both Links like Deku Nuts and bombs, while adult Link gets to use the Megaton Hammer, hookshot/longshot, arrows, etc. While young Link can only use things like the Slingshot, Deku Sticks, and Boomerang. I do think adult Link has better weapons overall, but Kid Link definitely has some good stuff too. But my favorite weapon in the game is probably the hookshot. I just love zipping around from place to place, and it's a weapon that's utilized throughout the entire game. And to be honest, I think I like every item in this game. The only one that I can really think that gets a little sidelined is the Megaton Hammer. You also get different swords throughout the game. The Kokiri sword is the only one that you can use as a kid, but as an adult you get 3. One being the Master Sword, the Giant Sword, and finally the Big Oron Sword, which is the strongest of all, and unlike the Giant Sword, will not break. But you also can't shield with it either. You also have a few different tunics that you can use, being the basic green tunic that doesn't add any benefits, the red tunic that allows you to survive in Death Mountain and you need for the Fire Temple, and finally the blue tunic which allows you to breathe underwater and you need for the Water Temple. Now mind you, you can only wear these as an adult, and personally, I like the blue tunic the most, and it's the one that I just enjoy wearing. You also get 3 sets of boots as well, one being the Kokiri boots that do nothing, the iron boots allow you to sink in water and are the bane of many people's existence for a certain temple, and finally the hover boots that let you have a small time of air before you falling to your doom. Now finally you get 3 different shields, one being the Deku Shield that you can only use as young Link and burns up if hit by fire, so be careful, but you can buy more. The Hylian Shield can be used by both Links and is fire resistant, but Kid Link can only do this kind of squat thing with it rather than use it as a proper shield. And finally, my personal favorite is the Mirror Shield. It can reflect light and certain elemental properties as seen in the Twin Rover fight. And with all of that, we are finally done with all the items. Whew. Now let's go ahead and talk about the overworld. This is the first time being able to move around in a 3D environment, particularly the overworld, and it shows just a little bit, to be honest. It's not a big deal to me, hence me not putting it in the complaints section, but it definitely does feel a little bit barren. There are enemies and secrets and things, but it is just a little bit empty. But back in the day, this was like a vast landscape to explore, and this was probably freaking wild when the game first came out. The enemies are surprisingly varied actually. For being the first 3D game in the series, there's actually a lot of variety enemy-wise. Yeah, you got your classics coming back like the Likes, Keys, and Stalfos, but let's not forget, oh yeah, these guys. Redeads. These guys definitely haunted the kids' dreams, and while I don't think I ever personally had a nightmare about them, they definitely scared me a lot and made me afraid to play the game at times. This is their first time appearing in a Zelda game, and sadly, it's not their last. They just kept coming up to keep terrifying me for decades to come. Oh, the bosses are great in this game as well, too. None are too challenging, with the exception of Phantom Ganon that definitely gave me some issues, including one of my very few deaths. But that's really okay, you know? Because this game is definitely more about the spectacle of everything rather than the challenge. I really like the designs too, with all of them having very different aesthetics that fit the theming of each dungeon. Now, my personal favorites are Bongo Bongo's drums, and I love the drums, and the final Ganon fight for the sheer presentation of it all. Now let's go and talk about temples a little bit. Honestly, the temples and dungeons in this game are some of the best in the entire series to me. The first one is not even an hour into the game, and I loved it for that. The game gets you right into the action with no hesitation, and it's a great first dungeon too. It's pretty easy to be honest, but that's definitely on purpose, mind you. It's like that because they want to help ease people into playing temples in a 3D space, because, you know, this was 3D for the first time in a Zelda game back when the game first came out. The Fire Dungeon has you getting bombs, and those items stick with you into the very end of the game. And inside Jabu Jabu's belly, it introduces us to the lover or hater, Princess Ruto. who apparently we're going to get married to. Those 3 are just what you can play as a kid. When you're an adult, you have 5 more temples and Ganon's tower, each having its own gimmick. The forest temple has you defeat 4 post sisters and return to the fire in the center of the room to go down. Fire requires you to save all the Gorons. The shadow and spirit temples share the same basic gimmick of you needing to go to a certain place first as Child Link, and then you can complete the rest of the temple as Adult Link. Finally, Ganon's castle has you go to different sections of the castle and destroy these weird ball things to get rid of the barrier to get where he is. Now, you might have noticed that I left just one itty bitty teensy tiny little temple out. Yep, it's the water temple, so infamous that it has its own Wikipedia page. This is crazy to me. Now, I kind of spoiled it before, but I actually really like the water temple. Everyone hates it, but I don't know. I kind of like it. It's really not that hard if you just keep really good track of what you're doing. Look, here's a tip for what I did to make it easy for myself. I went around in a circle for each floor, keeping real good track to make sure that I've gone to every single room before moving up to the next floor. You can move the water levels by playing Zelda's Lullaby in front of these little symbol thingies. Also, have Feora's Wind for the level 3 water raising spot. It will save you a lot of backtracking. Oh, finally, look out for this spot under the block when you raise up the water level in this room. This has stumped so many people have read online, so this is a big tip. So yeah, just do what I said here, and honestly, I really think you'll be just fine. Now, there was a 3DS remake in 2011 that fixed up some issues from the original, like making the iron boots an item, which makes the water temple so much less tedious, and gyro aiming like I mentioned earlier. Also, of course, they really updated the graphics, and even on 3DS, God, this looks stunning. But with that, I really don't have much else to say, but it is my preferred version. The only reason why I didn't play the version here is just because I got the shiny new gold card and I wanted to play it. I mean, can you blame me? Anyways, with all of that, let's go ahead and finally move on to the music. Once again, we are talking about the almighty Koji Kondo. This is the first Zelda game in the series to give certain characters their own themes of sorts. For example, the weird guy in the windmill has the song of Storms, or Sheik always having that one lovely tune that's always accompanying her. Honestly, music has probably never been more important in the games as it is in this one thanks to the ocarina mechanic that we talked about before. Despite their simplicity, they are some of the most memorable in the entire series. Kondo has said in the past how much of a challenge it was for him to create songs with such a small amount of buttons. But he also mentioned how rewarding it was. Fun fact, the real life ocarina sales went up thanks to this game. I even have a few of my own right here, check it out. The temple themes are some of the best as well. They all have their own individual themes for the first time in the entire series. A lot of them have this kind of like haunting allure to them, you know? Especially the forest temple. I remember as a kid, I couldn't complete this temple for the longest time because the music made me actually scared and I just couldn't play the game anymore. And as mentioned before, the fire temple theme had to replace because of an Islamic prayer, but hearing it in game creates a great atmosphere and I'm sad they had to cut it. You can also get something called the Scarecrow song, something I never did, so enjoy this footage instead. You can make up your own song to it as a kid and you can play it as special spots with your song and it will appear and you can hookshot it for some special goodies. You got two fan favorites being the Lost Forest and the big one, Gerudo Valley. This song is so well loved that it even gets its own spot at the Symphony of Goddess concerts. Basically what I'm trying to say is the music in this game is probably the best that it has ever been in the series up to this point. Kondo and the team knocked it out of the park with this one. When the game got re-released onto the GameCube, it actually came with essentially a second quest called Master Quest. Now this came as either a standalone copy or part of the Zelda collection. The collection is how I happen to have it. Hey everyone, please excuse the guerrilla style filmmaking with my phone camera and lav mic combo, but I wanted to show this off. I got this today. It just came in the mail. It's the standalone thing that I was talking about. That's the Master Quest, regular edition of course. That is the disc. I really like the disc. I think it's really cool. And finally, the manual. I really like the manual. I'm sad that manuals aren't really a thing these days, but they kind of don't need to exist anymore. And finally, here is the Wind Waker preview that came with it. The whole reason why you get this is because you actually had to pre-order Wind Waker to get this, which I'm surprised I never did, but because I have it on GameCube, but oh well. Anyways, again, I just wanted to start that off real quick because I'm just really excited. Okay, back to the video. This is thought to be Aura Zelda, which was originally going to be released on the 64DD, but never did due to the failure of the add-on. Basically all it is that the base game remains unchanged, but all of the dungeons have been reworked. Gold Skulltulas have been moved around, and certain items in the game that were optional in the base game, like the ice arrows, are now fully required to beat the game. Later on, when the game got a remake on the 3DS, the Master Quest was brought along with it, and you did have to unlock it by beating the main quest once. Now, the 3DS game did bring extra challenges along with the remixed dungeons, the new changes being that the entire game has been mirrored and the boss is causing extra damage. There's also a boss rush as well, just for that little bit of extra difficulty for the hardened veterans of the series, or at least of this game. This extra quest has been welcomed and mostly well liked by most gamers of the series, and is seen as a good challenge for those who want even more Ocarina of Time in their lives. The game, to the surprise of no one, is a masterpiece. Yes, some of the stuff in the 64 version is a little jank by today's standards, but then boom! You got the nice and shiny 3DS version right there that updates everything and brings everything up to modern standards. This was truly a lightning in the bottle moment for gaming, and one that will never be recreated no matter how much the game developers try. When Ocarina of Time came out, this is what made people realize what gaming could truly be, and I feel bad for the other companies back then after this came out, because this is what they had to live up to. These were the standards that they had to work with. This has been released on literally every Nintendo home console in some way since the 64, so you have no excuse to not be playing this game. If you haven't played this game yet, then I implore you, drop whatever game it is you're playing right now and go snag this one and play it immediately. You will not regret it. This game deserves all the perfect scores that it has ever gotten and will continue to do so. I love this game. And then finally, with all of that, we are at the end of the video. Quick self-plug here, I streamed this game over on my Twitch, Vincent__R, just as you see on screen. Chat and I had a great time going through it together, and I would love to see you there for more Zelda goodness. My next video will more than likely be Wind Waker. It could end up being Breath of the Wild Twilight Princess, but I'm pretty certain it's Wind Waker, so be sure to subscribe to Just Gaming so that way you can catch my next video in the Zelda series. And if you like this video, then please give it a like, it helps us out a lot. And what do you think about the game? Do you love it, or are you actually one of the people that actually don't like this game so much? Comment down below and let us know. Thank you so much for watching this overly long video, and see you later. Bye bye.